Cavazos and I'm an LPC associate from the state of Texas. So in today's video, I am going to be talking about the pros and cons of working in community mental health versus in private practice and versus in your own private practice. So the differences in working in those three different settings. And just a quick disclaimer, these pros and cons are based off of my personal experiences and the personal experiences of what I've heard from others as well in the mental health field. At the end of the day, I'm a huge supporter for each of us trying things out and seeing what works best for each of us. But so many of you have asked me, so I am making this video and I want to thank you so much for suggesting it. Also, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and join our community here on YouTube. Okay everyone, let's go ahead and get started with this video. So first things first, let's go ahead and start off by talking about the pros and cons of working in community mental health. I feel like this is the juicy stuff that everyone wants to know, like what is it actually like, which I completely understand because it feels like most of our grad school programs prepare us to go out into the world of working in community mental health versus private practice. So let's talk about it. Let's start off with the pros of working in community mental health. So personally, I think that one of the biggest ones is health insurance. This really plays a huge role in dictating what so many of us end up choosing for work. And so oddly enough, what I will say is during my time when I worked in community health, I had really great health insurance benefits and I never used them. I think I only maybe went to one doctor's appointment and it was because I was stressed because of the job that I was working in. So if that doesn't say everything, I don't know what does. Like I remember having thoughts during that time of, oh, I want to go to the dentist or I want to go do this and that with these great health insurance benefits that I have. I hardly ever had enough PTO because I had to continually earn that PTO, and when I did use it, I used it to recover from the job that I was working at. But we'll get into more of that later. So one of the pros of working community health is having that health insurance, and not every community health agency is the same, and also not all community health agencies have the same shared health insurance plan. So that's something to definitely ask about because I've also heard that some don't have really great programs either. So this is just one that I'm throwing out there because I feel like it's important to do a little bit more digging and know more about. So another pro or semi-pro, all of these I feel like are going to be semi-pros from my own biased experience, but another one is possibly having a fixed salary rate that you're paid. So it's not dependent on you bringing in clients, but the agency provides you with the client itself, and regardless of how many you see, you're still going to get your salary, you're still going to get paid. And I say this carefully because we're going to get into the cons. I feel like all of these things have a little bit of a catch to them. So, and another pro of community health, if you so choose to see it that way, I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm just raining on community health, but I can't help it. Community health makes it easy for me to do this. But another possible pro of working community health is PTO. So if you want to take a day off, you have to have PTO, but it is paid time off. So if you decide to request a day, then you get that time off. So yes, those are some of the possible pros, but if you work in community mental health as a counselor and you feel like there's other pros that I didn't mention, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. Okay, so some of the cons of working in community health are usually the larger caseloads. And again, this varies agency to agency, but for the most part, a lot of community health agencies have larger caseloads in place, so it gets very difficult for you to do your documentation and to have time to see all your clients and just keep up with it. You don't get a lot of breaks sometimes in between seeing clients, and this can lead to a lot of burnout and can make you feel like, you know, there's something wrong with me as the therapist, when in reality it's not a you problem. This is a problem with leadership and the way community health agencies are run. I personally know that when I worked in community health, I hardly ever had time for documentation. I had to do it so quickly. I didn't really get to document as well as I would have liked to because everything was just so on the go, so rushed, and I felt like I could never really stop and take a breather. And maybe for a while it can be tolerable and okay, but when you think of your career longevity wise, how long can we really sustain working like that? And so another con that just makes sense after saying this is high turnover rates. You might start to see that a lot of your coworkers that you started training with, you no longer see, like they just start quitting right after another or eventually. And so again, this is not a you problem, that is a them problem. They need to get their act together in the way that they value and just treat therapists and counselors and mental health professionals for sure. Burnout is definitely more common when you work in community mental health. It's something that you might start to notice other coworkers mention, or you'll start to kind of see the signs within yourself or others that it doesn't really look like people are enjoying the work that they're doing, but yet they're still trying to show up and do the best that they can for their clients. Another con is that you might have only a set or limited amount of sessions with your clients, so you don't really get a huge say in the treatment process and what you want to do because that's already set in place for you for the most part. And so another con is sometimes you might have to deal with communication issues between different supervisors or different people that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So there could be a lot of confusion and misinformation. And you might also have to juggle a lot of different ethical issues at play. It might not always align with the values that the community agency holds. So that's something that can definitely make a therapist feel unhappy in their workplace if they're constantly having to battle, those ethical issues with the agency they work with. So another con of working in community health, and this is a big one, is quotas. Quotas can be the death of you. They can constantly make you feel like your job is at risk or threatened because sometimes there are some quotas that you have to meet, and by quota I mean there's a certain amount of clients that maybe you have to see within a given day or work with, and if you don't see them, you're constantly made to feel like you could lose your job because you're not meeting that quota. And in most cases, a lot of those quotas that are set are very unrealistic because that agency might have to meet certain standards. And the last con that I have to share with you is that your PTO has to be earned in most cases. So if you wanted to take a mental health day or a day off because you really needed it and you don't have PTO, it's one of those it sucks to suck moments, like you're out of it, so sorry. And it really, really sucks because I remember working community health where there were just days that I needed to not be working. I was not okay. I needed a break and I couldn't take it because I ran out of PTO, which led me to eventually quit working community health and never going back. You literally could not pay me enough to go back to working community mental health. But I will say this, if you're in the position where that is your only option, it's okay to do it, and to also know that you don't have to be there forever. You can be there for a short time and then move on. So that is that on community mental health. And again, if you have any other cons that I didn't mention, let us know down in the comment section. Okay everyone, now let's go ahead and move on to the pros and cons of working for someone else's private practice. So some of the pros are that you may have referrals coming in from an established agency, and this is not always the case. Sometimes you may find that you'll go work for someone else's private practice and you're not getting a lot of referrals, and this is actually the experience that I've had and that I've also heard from other colleagues who do work for someone else's private practice. And again, not every practice is made equal, so the only way for you to know is to try it out, and maybe even also during your interview ask how they get referrals and how that process is. Another pro of working for someone else's practice is the flexibility that comes with it, meaning usually you tend to have more flexibility in creating your own schedule, the days and times you want to work, the clients you want to see. And again, this really depends on each group practice or each practice. So maybe you also have the option of doing telehealth or going in person. So there's definitely more room for different options available, or for you to at least maybe even negotiate. Now, the last pro that I have for working for someone else's private practice is the support that you can create, or the camaraderie between coworkers. I know That's always been my experience whenever I've worked with other counselors in training. It definitely can feel like an instant connection for the most part because you just have these shared experiences that you can talk about. Now, if you're working telehealth though, that might be a little bit more complicated. You would really have to put more effort into reaching out through email or talking to other counselors in training. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about some of the cons of working for someone else's private practice. So at the end of the day, when you're working for someone else's private practice, it is not your business, right? Essentially, you are a contractor in a way, so you don't really have a lot of say in the decisions that are being made, even if you're told that you are. You have ideas or things you want to do, it's something that has to be approved, right? Obviously by the business owner, your supervisor, things like that. And so another con is that usually employees are severely underpaid. And what I mean by that, if you usually see someone, charging, let's say $70 a session, that clinician is actually only making around $50, depending on the percentage that is taken out of what they're making per session. So it is rough. It is really rough, and you kind of have to decide what matters to you more. Another con is no health insurance benefits unless you're a full-time employee, and this differs again between private practices. Each practice is going to have different things that it offers, and in a lot of cases, a lot of employees have a hard time even becoming a full-time employee in private practice because you would have to have a larger caseload to do that, and you're not being paid very well, so it's a lot easier to again burn out. Moving on to the next con, and that is sometimes having onboarding issues or issues with training when you're a new employee. And so then we move on to another example where maybe there are, ways that onboarding happens, and working in a smaller environment like that also comes with like the family type of mentality sometimes. And that is, I don't know about anyone else, but that is a huge red flag for me as an employee. I don't want to go to work and feel like I'm in a family setting. I want to go to work, get my work done, disconnect, and go home and be able to separate those two and not feel that pressure to go to every meeting, to go to every single thing that is requested. So there's definitely some of that can go into it too. And again, these cons differ between different practices. I cannot stress that enough because your experience might be completely different. So another con is not having PTO, paid time off. So it's really on you to schedule clients and see where you are financially if you can afford to take time off. Now, some extra little things that I want to note after giving these pros and cons is that when you work for someone else's practice, you might have the option of being supervised. So having a supervisor while you're there. And that was not an option for me. I pay my supervisor for my LPC-associate license, but there are some practices that will have a supervisor on site if that's something that you're looking for, which again can be a pro or con depending on what you want, because on the other end of that, if you do end up going with the supervisor that your practice has, something to keep in mind is that you can't really fully be honest with that supervisor because they could easily just be telling your employer the things that you mention during supervision meetings, which for me is something that I would never want personally. But again, that might not be your situation. Maybe you are fully supported and comfortable in this practice that you're working for, because I have heard really good stories too, so that's amazing. It's hard to do a pros and cons video when really it depends and varies per agency, per practice. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the pros and cons of owning your own private practice. If you're new to my channel, hi, I own my own virtual private practice, so I can now actually make this pros and cons video out of some experience. Now, another quick little disclaimer is that I'm super fresh to owning my own private practice. Literally just started in April, so I'm sure there's going to be maybe some more pros and cons that I find along the way later, so we'll definitely have to revisit this again another time. But for now, these are some of the pros and cons that I wanted to share with you all. So when you own your own private practice, you are your own boss, and this can be a pro or a con depending on what you prefer, but I'm going to put this under a pro because you are in charge of your schedule, you're in charge of marketing, you decide how you want your practice to run, the policies that you create, you have full control of your pricing and the price you want to set for your sessions or for any other services you have. And you also have the freedom to decide what clients you want to work with. Now, another pro that I want to throw out there is no more wasted time in meetings that you don't have to go to. I am the type of person who has always hated and loathed going to meetings where I feel like this could have been an email. We did not have to come sit here for this amount of time to do this. And that is why I'm putting this as a pro. But again, it depends. Maybe you're super into meeting with coworkers and meetings, so that would actually be a con for you. Who knows? But for me personally, I see that as a pro. I know everything that's going on with my business because I'm in charge of it. I'm able to see it on my EHR program, from the billing, to the emails I'm getting from clients. So there's no communication barriers between me and someone else. And when you own your own private practice, this could be different because maybe you decide to employ like a virtual assistant or an assistant to help you, so that communication would have to really be up there to really help you in delegating tasks and making sure that things are getting done the way that they need to. But personally, my dream and vision for my own private practice is to just work independently as myself, not employ anyone else unless one day I decide to get an assistant of some kind to delegate tasks, but that would be it. I do not ever see myself employing other therapists or employees. I'm very much happy working for myself, by myself. I love it so much. Another pro is that if I want to take a break or I want to take some time off, I can schedule that whenever I want to without having to write up an email that gives me so much anxiety. Let me know if you relate whenever you have to email your boss or your supervisor to ask for your time off. That's not something that I ever have to worry about anymore. So again, you are your own boss, so you get to create the work-life balance that you want for yourself. Now let's go ahead and move on to some of the cons of working for your own private practice. So the responsibility does always fall on you to delegate tasks or to get things done. So if you're not a person who likes to be organized or stay on top of things to the best of your abilities, this can be really difficult because for the most part there's no one to tell you that it's time to do your notes, that it's time to do marketing. You are the one who is in charge of your schedule. And another con is that if you really need support, you have to seek it out because you won't have it readily available. So for example, with me right now, I currently do have it available because I'm an LPC-associate, so I have a supervisor that I pay to supervise me, and so I get to consult cases with her and talk about all things licensure and the mental health field. So I end up seeing her weekly, but once I'm on my own, I won't have that anymore unless I decide to maybe seek some support elsewhere. And so another con of owning your own private practice is that you don't have PTO from a company or from an agency. You're the one who's looking at your billing and finances and everything that's going on, and you decide if you're financially in a place where you can afford to take some time off or go on vacation. And those are most of the pros and cons that I can think of for working in these various settings that I spoke to you all about. I'm sure that there are so many more other things. So if you feel like you have one that I didn't mention, feel free to let us all know in the comments down below and share your experience if you feel comfortable doing that. Now, with all those pros and cons that I shared with you all, everyone, and through my own experience, I decided that opening my own private practice with both the pros and cons was the best decision for me. And looking back now, I regret nothing. I love having my own private practice. Even if building it takes a little bit more time, there's nothing worth the peace of mind and the improvement in my own mental health since doing this. Like, nothing's worth more than that for me. But that decision lies within each of us to try things and to see what we like most, what we don't like. So I definitely want to encourage you, if you heard a lot of the cons and thought, oh no, what am I gonna do? Don't feel discouraged. The only way to truly know what you like, again, is to go out and try it, even if it's just for a couple of months, to give yourself the opportunity to do what you're curious about. If you're new to my channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button, liking this video if you liked it, hitting the notification bell, and leaving me a comment. All of these things help support my channel so that I can keep creating videos for you all. Take care, everyone, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye.